crossfade. Fancy. I think it works. Seems like it does. All right, cool. Well, all right. I guess it's the first live stream showing off the tracker. So we can. This is victim cache in a Zoom. Sweet. Say hi, John.
Hi.
There you go. Awesome. So yeah. So I was just gonna go through for this one. I was just gonna go through like what the tracker is, and you know, if people have questions about looking at the source code and stuff, we can go through that too. But otherwise, I was gonna. I guess I'll just kick things off actually with maybe centering that with the actual tracker. Oh, I know why it's like that. Let me full screen it. Maybe. That's close enough. All right. So, oh, actually, it's the wrong one. I have 2 copies open. That's why.
You have 2 copies of the tracker open?
Yeah, you can totally do. Like I do that on purpose sometimes.
Oh, I haven't tried that.
Yeah, it works. It works. Okay, so this is. Let me make sure it's the right one actually, because I've been. Sweet. So this is the demo song that we've been teasing out, and I can go through it because one of the problems is people notice probably in our teaser videos I don't have a full playback yet. We'll get there, but yeah, let's just hear it real quick. So this is like the latest version of the song, the chiptune version of the song, which might turn into a chip surf version at some point. Of
I've already been working on it.
Are you working on all the updates? Because I keep changing it on you.
Well, I mean, whatever. Just copy and paste it in there. It's not, you know. There's some parts. There's some guitar parts.
Nice.
We can mix and match.
Interesting thing about that for folks is that like we don't have any MIDI sync, or I didn't write any MIDI sync set up on this thing yet, but like it has been extremely consistent BPM wise, including on the real hardware. Yeah, surprisingly so. And on that note, I have the real hardware. It's right behind me, but the connectors and HDMI cables and all that stuff to make it work didn't work. So emulator today, womp womp. Oh well. Anyway, all right. So let's do the demo song real quick. Maybe. Oh, I press. Got to be on the right screen.
Kids, and I was like beep up boop up beep up boop up beep up boop up boop up beep up boop up beep up, and they're like, what is that? I was like, oh, it's a song that Tim wrote.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, that's the song that we wrote because it's chip surf now, which I guess we should have had the version prepared.
Sure, it will be the song that we wrote when I throw some overly reverb guitar on it.
Sweet. Yes. Yeah, I'm digging it. I need to write a second part for it, but and I wrote another one, and I also completely aside. You heard it. I wrote like a total aside, Analog Pocket came in 2 days ago, and I've been kind of jamming on that. Hence the lack of new features for the tracker. So to go through this real quick too, I guess it's a half debug display, half playback. And I don't know if I will keep this, but I don't know if I'll add like a pattern scroll. And for those who don't know, who've never used a tracker, normally it looks like this. And I don't do that during playing the whole song is because I haven't figured out how to fit. Like, because right now it's just playing a single pattern, and to figure out to explain was every time a pattern would change, I'd have to write like 8K out to video RAM, which was a lot. And so it would stall. So I have to become
How
smarter
much
than
video
that.
RAM does the X16 have?
Oh crap.
Just
Actually, it was more
curious.
than 8K. It was 8K worth of pattern data.
Well, yeah, but
That's
writing the 8K,
way
and
more
just
video.
writing
Yeah.
that amount is going to take time.
It's like 256K of video RAM or something like that. Maybe
Okay.
128. It's small. So, the actual system can have up to 2.5 megabytes without an expansion cartridge, and then with it's like it's another 3.5 megabytes. Which is how I'm going to do the PCM, like the digital playback stuff. So that is this channel over here. This doesn't do anything today. At least it shouldn't. I hope it doesn't. So yeah, I'm adding that, and then I'll add in the FM chip, which really is like rounds out the sound. But I haven't done that, and I'll probably do the FM next after some certain features I was going to show folks. In fact, I guess as a teaser, I replaced, for folks that are familiar with the tracker at least, I replaced the debug screen F12 with tables. This is like, it looks horrible because it's the pattern behind it. In fact, let me. I was gonna say I'm gonna fix it, but it's whatever. It's just like a mock-up right now because the idea with the tables is, well, and actually we can sort of get into that. In fact, let me fire up not the demo song. Hopefully this doesn't crash. I'm sure it's gonna crash at least a couple times. What do I call this? Oh, live stream. So I'm gonna load it. Oh yeah, it's gonna crash. Awesome. All right. Gotta keep count how often that happens.
I'll put an update in the chat.
Nice.
So that it will sear into your brain forever.
Though the problem is I'm not doing very good checking on the file name, and so there's a bunch of UI issues that I gotta sort out, and this is one of them. But anyway, so first I was gonna like kind of point out what a tracker is because the documentation's online, but I don't have a lot of screenshots and pictures and stuff. So for folks that have never used a tracker, this came out of the Amiga, which the Commander X16 has kind of heritage to, in that Amiga was owned by Commodore. Although the X16 is kind of the spiritual successor to the Commodore PET, so predated the Commodore 64 in terms of like the architecture. Commodore 64 is actually more complicated, but the X16 is actually way faster and has more memory, and so it's kind of apples to bananas, I guess. But anyway, when the Amiga came out, it supported 4 digital channels, and someone came up with an idea. The original one was, I don't have screenshots, guess I could have pulled one up, was SoundTracker, which was the very first tracker that I'm aware of anyway, kind of before my time. Well, actually not before my time, but before I knew anything about it. And essentially it's like a piano roll from like the old 1800s mechanical piano things. It's kind of a similar idea, except you can specify more information, and things are grouped in chunks, and the chunks are typically a pattern. So in our case, DreamTracker has 64 rows in hexadecimal, that's 0 to 3F, per pattern. And within that pattern, you have all the channels for all the sound chips. So 2 sound chips, I guess. 16 PSGs, which is currently what works. A digital, which is PCM. So that will, for the tracker, that'll probably be something like NES style samples is my plan. And then another 8 using the Yamaha FM chip, which isn't here yet, but it will be. And then out of that, you basically, you play notes. You can see there's like normal notes here corresponding, like that's E, just to let the E on the piano at the 3rd octave. And then there's like modifiers. So for example, in this track or this channel, I'm specifying again E5, instrument 0. I'll get to that in a second. Volume 0, and then I'm specifying an effect. And the reason I did it here is actually because of a bug. So we'll get to that in a second. But for each channel, I can specify any instrument that I want. So I can change the instruments anytime I'm playing something. And that's using this column. So if I, for example, press 02, you can see in the top left-hand corner, it tells me I'm using the triangle instrument. That's the hats instrument, pulse width, so on and so forth. And then here, you just basically put notes on the keyboard, kind of like a piano. So like the Q key is C5, well, in my case, C plus 1 octave. So my octave is set to 4. And so Q is plus 1, whatever your octave is. Then that means W is D. So the number 2 is C sharp. It's easier if you just play with it, but it's basically like a keyboard. And then once you have that, you can basically make music based on the instruments. Then you have two ways to modify the sound in the pattern itself. And one is the volume. So here I'm specifying 0 volume, and I'm doing that on purpose. The volume goes all the way up to 3F for the Vera chip, which is currently what's supported. And then I don't remember what the Yamaha is. I think it's slightly more. It's basically 6 bits. And actually here, 3F would be max volume, but I can actually go higher. I can do like 41, 42. Or really, I can put whatever I want because I'm not constraining what you put in. It's just if it doesn't do anything, it doesn't do anything. Because even though 3F is the max volume, I have 8 bits. So I have up to FF worth of stuff that I can put in this column. So anything above 3F is for special stuff. So like 40 to 42 sets panning. So 40 is center, 41 is left, 42 is right. The reason why you would do that will hopefully become apparent in a second. And then you have an actual legitimate effects column, which you can do all sorts of crazy things. And I can pull up the effects documentation here in a second. This one is glissando, so glide. So we'll hear it in a second, but I'm rounding out the pitch, kind of like slew in a typical synthesizer. It's almost the same thing. It actually is the same thing, except it's digital. Anyway, there's a number of effects you can use, and if you notice, there's only one effect per channel per row. So in other trackers, you can add more effects. Here, I'm not doing that, and that was a design decision partly because of the heritage of where the tracker comes from, because I based it on Impulse Tracker, which is not super relevant here, but that's where it comes from. And folks that are keen-eyed will know all the shortcuts are basically very similar. The effects aren't similar yet. I'll get there. And there's a reason for that. But like F5 plays the song. It's the same thing as Impulse Tracker. F11's the order list. Again, same thing as Impulse Tracker. The other thing, too, is that specifically there's only one effect per row, also like Impulse Tracker. And part of that is because the trackers of the last 20 years have all been all the popular ones have all been based on Fast Tracker, which was another PC tracker that came out around the same time as Impulse Tracker. And back then, they were kind of like two competing standards, and they were both like happy. Some people wrote an Impulse Tracker, which is what I did, and some people used Fast Tracker. But then at some point it consolidated, and you ended up with all modern trackers, it would seem. There's others, but the ones that seem like everybody uses are based on essentially Fast Tracker or FamiTracker, which is the NES tracker that was itself based on Fast Tracker. Anyway, super different interface. Here it's a little simpler, and one of the downsides is that you can only have one effect per column. So one of the ways I got around that is tables. So that's what this, long story short, is what this is going to be for. You can't really tell because I've like murdered the interface. Because again, it's just a mock-up. But because like there's reasons why it looks ugly, so I won't get into that. But basically, this is going to allow you to specify up to 4 effects probably per row, and the rows are going to run at the engine speed. What's the engine speed, you might ask? Well, the other feature that you might use is envelopes. And this does come from FamiTracker, so this is not an Impulse Tracker thing. I took a similar idea. So envelopes, although I implement it differently, envelopes let you specify, like change over time. You can do whatever you want here. And I don't have a lot of really good, I need to add some shortcuts to make this less painful, because like having to do this and hold the up arrow is kind of slow. And it's hard to know where you are. Like you can look at the position number, but that doesn't actually mean anything. So I got to work on the interface a little, but functionally it's going to do the same thing. So here you can draw an envelope that will be evaluated over time at engine speed, which right now is 1/60th of a second. That's as fast as you can go, fast as anything will go in the tracker, because it's basically the refresh rate of the computer monitor. So that will change. I will have in the song options a way to hopefully specify like external MIDI sync once the hardware is available, even if I have to build it. VSync, which is what it currently is today, and then using like timers on the X16, like the actual VIA timers that are part of the 6502 chipset. So that's coming. And when that does happen, depending on how much processing power I actually have to evaluate all this stuff will depend on how fast the thing can go. Right now it's VSync because I don't actually know how fast I can go. I did try the tracker at 1 megahertz and it mostly worked. And it was kind of flawless at 4. So I know I have more headroom, which is good because I think most of the computationally intensive stuff that I've done, that I will have to do, I think I'm done, except for digital audio, which is going to take a pretty big chunk. But for like all the stuff that we're doing here with playing the song and stuff, like all that's is not, because of the way the sound chip is, it's not cheap. And so you have to do a lot of hand holding for the sound chip to do some of the crazy stuff that we'll show off in a second. So
Are you planning to be able to save instruments? So like save and load instruments into different songs and stuff?
oh, that's a great question. And originally I was going to say yes, and I still might. But I have to figure out how to do that, because what really makes an instrument useful is the combination of this screen plus the envelopes plus, when I implement it, the tables. And so when you export an instrument, I have to export all that. And then when you import it, I have to figure out where to put it, because there already be tables in the system. So I haven't figured that out yet, but I will. I might make it annoyingly separate, where you have to like load and export envelopes and tables. I'm not sure, but that's a really good question, and that should probably be a feature request, because I've thought about that as well. So that's a good point.
Beep boop boop feature request.
Yeah, if there's time, I'll get to the desktop and I can show people how to do that and submit feature requests. Because I use them because I use them for my own purposes and stuff. That's true for bugs too. Yeah, speaking of instruments though, John that's a good segue to like this screen. So we saw envelopes. And we saw tables, but that's just it doesn't exist yet, but I will describe that as we go. In the instrument section, you can have up to 128 instruments. Keen-eyed observers will notice that there's a bug, which is this. Where did your instruments go? Where'd the arrow key go? And that's because there's more instruments than you can see. Obviously, you can only see 32, and I need to set up scrolling, and I just haven't done it yet because I haven't needed more than 32 instruments. So there you go. And in fact, now that there's more pattern effects, the idea of needing special instruments should become less and less depending on what people are trying to do. But before I had pattern effects, I had to do everything in the instrument screen. Like if I wanted to do, for example, detune or panning. So you can see I do both for channels instruments 4 and 5. And then here I'm just doing panning. I don't have to do that anymore because now there's pattern effects for it. However, doing it in the instruments allows you to get around that whole limitation of only having set column effects per channel. So you have to use like all these things intermixed. You can see there's a drawing bug here. There's a rendering bug. Sweet. It is alpha. Anyway, so instruments. There's going to be 3 different types of instruments, and right now I actually have it separated. So F3 is the Vera, F4 is going to be FM, which doesn't do anything, and then there's going to be digital. And I'm out of F keys, so I don't know. I'm going to have to change how that's going to work so that you can quickly access like the instrument that you want to look at. And what I'll probably do is I'll probably have F3 be for all the instruments, and then you just pick which instrument bank you want to use, because I'm going to more than likely I'm going to separate the instruments out. So like when I have FM support, it's going to have its own set of instruments numbered 0 to whatever, and the same is going to be true for the digital audio. And I did that because I don't like how FamiTracker and Furnace and stuff mix the instruments. For me, that's actually like more complicated to think about, because I didn't have to figure out that like instrument 7 only works on the digital track, or instrument 8 only works on FM, and like I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
So
that's annoying.
Right. I'm sure there was a reason why they did it that way. I feel like here, because all those 3 instruments are going to be completely different, both in terms of how you're going to use it as a user and in terms of how I'm going to program it as the programmer. So like, it didn't make any sense to intermingle them. And like, so for example, envelopes probably won't be supported for digital audio. I don't think there's any way to do them. Maybe. I could probably do some volume stuff, maybe, like potentially, but it's not going to be in the same way. Like pulse width's not going to mean anything for FM, stuff like that. Anyway, today we only have the PSG, so it doesn't really matter. And for the PSG, it's pretty easy. So if you want to make a new instrument, cool instrument, you just type what it is. You have up to 16 characters. You press tab to move over to whichever instrument you're selecting and to edit that like actual instrument, right? So if I scroll up and scroll down, you can see all the settings. Here's where this diverges a little bit from FamiTracker. So I can set defaults basically, right? So this is fine tune. So if you're making you want to make a super saw, you can use fine tune here. And this prevents you from having to use pattern effects to do the same thing. You could use pattern effects to do the same thing. It's just up to you on how you want to do it. And I'll get to that in a second too. Then you specify the waveform. I'm going to make these like pretty and colored, but this dark text on the right kind of tells you what it is. If you are using pulse width, you can then optionally specify what the starting pulse width is. It's not, it goes from 0 to full. So it doesn't go from like 0 to full to empty. So like, in other words, 3F is 50% pulse width. So that's the fattest sound that you're going to get. It doesn't go from like 0 to full to 0 like a lot of other PWMs do. And that's important if you're doing sweeps. So when you use pattern effects, you'll have to remember that that's actually the case. I didn't remember that initially. That's why I'm mentioning it. In other words, 0 is the thinnest sound, 3F is the fattest sound. That's all you got to remember. Then you can specify any number of envelopes. Currently, PWM and volume are the only ones that work. So pitch is there. It doesn't work. So you can put numbers there. They just won't end up doing anything. You enable and disable it with space, and that makes it green or not green. The number, and this is what's different compared to FamiTracker, envelopes are global. So you can specify up to 32 of these things. Only 32 right now because of memory things. I'm trying to keep my life simple. But the envelopes are really long. So I might change it to where you can have more envelopes. Right now, this is just really simple for my life. There's a really specific reason why they're 32. And they're actually up to 255 bytes in length. So on the screen, I'm only drawing about a quarter of the envelope. And I found that like I haven't really ever needed more than that, because if I need something that's super long, I'll use a pattern effect. But that's me. And you have the memory. So once I make envelopes easier to like draw, like I might have mouse support where you can just like draw the envelope, that'll make this much easier. But the thing is, you can reuse these envelopes across whatever you want. So across instruments, across different envelopes in the same instrument or different instruments, does not matter. If you say in the instrument screen that you want to use envelope 0 and you turned it on, then you're going to use envelope 0 regardless. Now, when the envelope is evaluated, it's like the way it works right now is as soon as you play a note in the row, the envelope kicks off and it will start evaluating from 0 to length. And the reason the length's there is that if you wanted to if you're reusing the envelope and you wanted to end the envelope at a different place, like you didn't want an instrument to tail off to 0 volume, you can specify that. Or if you want to do a loop, or more importantly, when I implement note release, which doesn't work today, only note off, then you can use the length to specify where you want to stop evaluating the envelope until you hit note release, which will then like let the envelope tail off, kind of like a conventional synthesizer envelope. You can like simulate an ADSR envelope doing it that way if you wanted to. And then when you combine the loop, which also doesn't work today, but you can set the parameters, you can use that to actually do the whole full ADSR. So like you can actually have a sustain that will actually do something interesting. Like if you want the loop to, like say for example, this makes more sense for the PWM. If I wanted to loop between two PWM points and kind of have it wobble while I'm playing, like a lead or something, I can do that here. And then when I use note release, I can have it stop the loop, and then it will keep going through the envelope until it gets to the whatever length you specify or until the end. So that's a kind of a crash course in envelopes. The pitch is going to work different. So this is the view if you're using volume or pulse width. And the LNR at the top is special. It doesn't work yet, and I'm not sure if I'm going to implement it or not. It would allow you to automate panning across the envelope. So if you wanted to have, for some reason, you want to be hard panned left for part of the envelope and then hard panned right, you could. And similarly for the PWM envelope, that actually includes the waveform. So if you wanted to change the waveform during the envelope, you totally could. So if you wanted to go from like a pulse width to like a saw, you could. And that might be kind of interesting because you might set the envelope to change to a saw right after your loop point on the release. So if you want to do something weird like that, you could. Fun fact, you can also do that in the pattern data, so you don't have to do that in the envelope. For the pitch envelope, I'm using the entire 8 bits instead of the 6 bits that you see here. And so it's going to be a different view. And it's even worse than that because the pitch envelope can go up or down. So it might even be a 16-bit envelope. That's one of the benefits of the envelopes being so damn long, is that I can use 2 bytes per thing instead of 1. And so that's going to be different. So I don't have that. And that would be really nice because it lets you do some cool stuff that you like. You can make some really nice drums that way, for example. So that's at some point I'll implement that. Doesn't exist today, but we can do some fun stuff using the patterns to kind of simulate that. So that's the instrument page. So I've basically communicated everything and then some for how you would make an instrument. So let's go through a couple of these.
For the length, like
Yeah.
what unit of measurement is the length? Is it like
Position.
is it position within the envelope?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can also think of it as counter, like it's because it's the same thing. It's the number of counters that it's running.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's actually buggy right now, so the length has to be +1, whatever you want the envelope to be. I have to look into that. So, and it doesn't matter, like if your envelope just tapers off to 0, then it's fine, right? Like it finishes the envelope and you're done. Before I implemented that, the envelope would like loop, which was kind of, in fact, it still might, honestly. That still might actually be a bug. I'll have to look at that. It's just the envelope being so long, like even though it goes really fast, it's 60 times a second, like that's 4 some odd seconds before it would like cycle back around in on itself.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so it's length. And I just, like, I had a working example somewhere of when this was actually important. I can't remember. And actually,
it might be a good idea to actually put like the numbers at the bottom of the
yes, it would be actually
bottom of this. That would be a little easier.
There's an open bug for that actually. I'm gonna put a little arrow.
Okay.
So like, and I'll put the numbers as well. But the reason I had the numbers there originally, and I removed them because I was like, man, these are gonna change when you're able to scroll back and forth.
Yeah.
And so I might put them there. It kind of cluttered it up. So I think I may or may not have them, but I'm definitely gonna have an arrow because there's like a cool Petsky character arrow pointing up that will like be perfect.
You could at least have like a few. Like you gotta put like 0 to 3F or whatever it is, right? Like you could just put just a few, just so you basically orient yourself.
Yep.
No,
you're totally right. It's interesting because I haven't messed with envelopes since I started having pattern effects. So I've been mostly using those. And the reason for that is because, well, we'll get to why. Because there's sometimes like, part of it's because of how I implemented the engine. And there's, for example, one thing that isn't here that actually is in the, for folks that are writing their own X16 programs, there's a music bank and there's a bunch of nice features in it. I didn't end up using it. I used a couple things from it, but I didn't use the whole thing because I was running into some kind of weird edgy cases. And the type of stuff I had to do, like I had to update the Vera so often, it was easier for me to do it directly. But one of the features it had that I really liked was attenuation. And originally I didn't like it because I was like, that's weird, that's backwards. Because I've been used to, in a tracker, I've been used to thinking of like absolute volume. Like if I put a number in here, like 30, I expect that that's going to be the volume. Well, the problem right now is I could put 30 in there, but if you're evaluating an envelope, then that 30 is going to get trumped by the envelope because the engine's going to evaluate the envelope right after. And so you're like, well, what do you do about that? Like you could use the volume column to set, instead of 30 absolute, you could be like 30 relative. So, but then like, what does that mean? Yeah. So what I decided to do, this was like 2 hours ago, was, yeah, because you can go up to 0 to FF. It means I have 3 6-bit banks and a 4th for like fancy, like, single action commands. So like left, right, turn volume envelopes on. There's going to be like a bunch, I think, in here. But one of them is like, I was kind of probably gonna make the last bank or the last 6-bit set. So I think C0 to FF was going to be attenuation. So if you set, I'm messing up my pattern. Let me go to like a blank pattern. Okay, so if you set, say FF, that will be muted. Effectively, you've muted the track, and it doesn't matter what's on the track because it will take whatever you load in and then apply the attenuator to it, and then that's it. So the nice thing about that is if I want to, in fact, here's a really good example. Let me actually go back here to here. This is how I'm doing an echo. So if you want to hear the echo, oh, actually, hold on. We ran into a bug. There we go. So we've got some echo going on. If you listen really carefully, it's a little buggy, and I can explain why. I'm going to fix it. Actually, I'm going to fix it with flags, because I'm going to allow you to pick, I think, which mode of volume sweeps, any sweeps that you want to use. So you can have sweeps loop, which could be cool for effects, and you can have sweeps hit the max or the minimum and then stop. And so I'm using a volume sweep here, and the problem is that it's looping, and so you go from 0 volume to full volume and then back down, which is kind of annoying. And if you listen real carefully, you can actually hear that. But anyway, this is the one way you can set up a delay. The other way I could do it, and if you notice I'm using different instruments here. So I've got instrument 0, 8, and 9. And so if we go to 8 and 9, you can see it's panning, and I also have the default volume set to 30 instead of 3F. What would be kind of cool, and what I've actually always wanted in a tracker myself, is if I could go like, okay, this one's full volume. So I'm trying to use what I'm going to implement. So like that has 0 attenuation. This has like, I don't know, 10 levels of attenuation. That's kind of a lot. And then this has whatever that number is. And so it will take whatever you set up in the combination of the instrument and then whatever is set up in the channel, and then like subtract it by a global for the channel, which is actually a feature that came from the C16 ROM, and I'm going to like borrow it because I think it's a really good idea. So kudos to Mooing Lemur for that one, because he wrote all that. We don't have that today. So that's why I have 3 instruments here to do the same thing, which is not the most ideal, because intuitively you'd want to do something like this. And in FamiTracker, this is what you would do. You know, I would do like, I don't know, this. Well, it doesn't work because of how things are evaluated. So I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to fix it in a better way. Yeah, so having gone through that, I was going to play this song, which is like a little special one I made for the live stream, and then we can kind of go through how patterns actually work and like maybe try to fit all this stuff together. So I'll play this real quick, and hopefully the weird high-pitched noise that I just played earlier is actually the reason I have these here, because there's a weird issue with glide, and I think I know what it is, because it only happens when the channel doesn't have an instrument in it yet. So like when you first start the tracker, and it causes like a weird pitch thing where it's going in the opposite direction that the glide should actually go to. So I got to fix that. I know how to do it, I'm pretty sure, but I have to make sure that's what the issue is. Anyway, so like, we'll play like live stream song is what I've called it, because I'm super creative.
Usually your
Using what?
Usually your titles are super creative. Like they're like Jumbotron Hammer songs.
Oh, now we have to name a song Jumbotron Hammer. That sounds awesome. I don't have enough characters though. Song name's going to be 60 characters in length. I may change that actually. That's something for another day. So it just ends because I don't have a pattern effect for stop song, but I'll have one. So, and I didn't add all the effects possible. A, because I ran out of time, because I wrote this like, again, 2 hours ago. And it's very like, it's not really a song. It's just a bunch of like, you know, it's a repeating theme where I add elements, which I guess is a song. But I did that on purpose so that we can actually look and see how some of this like fits together. So we've got the first one. I gotta pull up my cheat sheet because I can't remember my own effects. So I'm gonna do that on my other monitor. Okay, so right now there's no echo, but there is a glide. And so to figure out how this works, so this combines 2 concepts from Impulse Tracker, where you had only pattern state effects. So if you applied an effect to a pattern or to a row, so like in this case 08C0, if you did that, it only takes effect for that thing. And if you want to keep doing it, you have to keep specifying it. So you have to keep doing this like over and over and over again. You can't just set it and forget it. Well, FamiTracker works a different way, where it is set and forget. And that's actually it's bitten me a lot of times because it's a benefit but it's hard to remember, especially when you're arranging the song. Which, as an aside, this is one reason I have this screen, because this screen will tell you as you're playing the song what things have been turned on, and so you can kind of go, oh, I need to turn that off if I no longer want to use that effect, which is really nice. So hopefully that burns for your people. So you can see right here, I have a volume sweep on channel 0, and then I actually don't have glide. There it is. So now I've turned on glide. So I can look at that and I can see how fast the glide is, and I can see that there's a volume sweep and all that sort of stuff. So what does that actually mean? Well, it means there's a bunch of different pattern effects that you can basically turn on and off. So I can turn on volume sweep, which is what this is, and then I can turn on glide, which is what this is, which means I can turn on a bunch of different effects, which in turn is why I want tables. Because if you want to turn on a bunch of effects at the same time, or turn them off for that matter, or emulate an envelope or whatever you want to do, you can use tables for that. In this case, they don't exist, so it doesn't matter. And I have to get around that because I want to use a glide, and I can't both do a volume sweep and a glide at the same time. So in this case, it doesn't really matter because I wanted to start the glide here anyway. No big deal. Actually, I wanted to start it here. I lied, because this is the first note that's different. Anyway, so these are sort of state-based effects. And if I go to... Can I go to desktop? See if I mess this up. All right, cool. So these are them. Both for the current, for the var effects, and there's a good chunk. I want to add more, like global effects in particular, so you can change the song speed and stop the song and skip patterns and do all sorts of stuff. But then it also explains sort of what the slides and sweeps are, as well as gives you the cheat sheet for the 6-bit ranges that I mentioned earlier that I can never remember. And then finally, the volume column effects, and this is where some of the special ones I mentioned are. Where those special ones live might change because I'm also wanting to do the attenuation, and I didn't mention it, but you can also set the pulse width in the volume column as well, which is another way to get around one effect per column type stuff. And I'm going to have like a bunch of like turning on envelopes, and this is where I'm also going to set the whether sweeps are like loop end to end or whether they stop at the extremes. So like if you wanted a volume sweep to go to 0 and you didn't want to loop around, which is what's happening in the song right now, you can set that. And that will also probably be set maybe per instrument. I'll have to ponder that. Anyway, that's these. So if we go back here, full screen this thing, neat. You can see that in play here. So I've got right now a single kind of boring song. Well, then the second part, I'm adding some cool, like panned echo, sweet. And then we start adding a kick drum, which is over here. This is what I've been waiting. I've been stressing myself out about writing stuff for the tracker to get here because I needed the ability to specify pitch sweeps, and that's exactly what this does. So it sweeps from a pitch down really fast to emulate a kick drum. Same thing in LSDJ or Commander Tracker or any chiptune tracker. If you want to make like a kick, you usually use a square wave pulse width, which is what I'm doing, and then you run it down really fast. But to illustrate the point about the sweeps, if I go, where'd my character screen go? Here we go. So, oh, and I didn't mention, but you can use page up and page down to loop, which can be really nice. But if I remove this, which is note off, by the way, that's note release. Doesn't work today, so there's no point in talking about it. But if I turn this off, you listen real carefully. In fact, let me show you another feature, which is cut and paste. So I'm going to go over here, randomly pick a pattern. If you heard really quick, you heard like that kind of sizzly sound. It's because the pitch was rolling back in on itself. So if I actually just only do this, you're going to see it, which is kind of painful, so I apologize. But you can do some really cool stuff with that. So there's a reason why you might want to have it loop, because that's how you get like the Pac-Man sounds and stuff. But there's times where you do not want it to do that. And so that's why I'm going to have it configurable in some sort of way. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet, but that will make not having to remember how fast the slide goes, the pitch slide or the sweep, like it's at least uncomplicate my life. And in a large part, the reason I'm writing this is for me, So everybody else is just riding the coattails, I guess. Anyway, so that was a kick. So now if we add the kick in, oops. Sweet. You can hear I didn't re-add my volume or my note off. So let me put that back. So one thing folks may notice also is that I don't have, I got to change the instrument here. There we go. I don't have, like, if you leave the pattern editor and you come back, you start at the beginning. And I don't like that. And I took it away. It didn't used to do that, but I took it away because I was getting like weird off by one errors, which would drive me crazy. And I have to figure out what those are. So it's coming back because trying to edit 25 channels when you have to start at channel 0 every single time can get really annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I noticed that when I was, I mean, I didn't try to edit 25 channels, but it does put you back at the 0 position each time.
Yeah, it's a workaround, unfortunately. So you also can't go backwards. So if you tab over and you shift tab back, you can't, it doesn't loop. And it would be nice if it looped. And I think it used to, but I was having, again, the one-off problems. And actually the reason for that is, so when you go up and down, so if I'm scrolling the pattern, I'm actually scrolling the data in video memory because the Vera has scroll functions, which is really nice. It does not have enough video memory for me to put the entire pattern from left to right in memory. So when I tab over, I'm actually redrawing the screen, which means it's way easier for me to like get off by one or like mess something up where like where you think you are is not where you are. And it's a really big problem because the way that I add data into the actual patterns that live in not video memory, but live in like the system memory is by way of video memory. So when you put a note in the pattern, it puts it in video memory first and then puts it in the actual original place. And the reason I do that is because like I have to convert what you typed in, at least I think that's how I do it. I have to convert what you typed in, which ends up being this thing on the screen that I then have to like figure out like what note you put in and like convert because you've got like sharps and like not sharps and you've got an instrument number and then like you've got like what position you are as a character. It's not super trivial and is one of the reasons why it took so damn long for me to get the tracker functional, because one of the things I really wanted was cut and paste, which I use all the damn time. I used it for this whole song. In fact, like, do it right now. I'm just gonna cut and paste this track. Trying to like remake the same track over and over again would be like wildly tedious, and I just didn't want to do it. So I implemented that, but that took a lot of like thinking about how stuff fits in video memory and like where patterns go. It's because I suck as a assembly programmer. I mean, people write super complicated games. They're way more complicated than this tracker. So it's a me thing. But nonetheless, it took me a while to figure out. Anyway, I'll actually get into cut and pasting in a second because like there's some nice tricks that you can use. And I do apologize because the cut and paste works the same way as Impulse Tracker for the most part. I don't have cut. I actually have copy paste. And in fact, there is no copy buffer right now. So I say this is true. If I copy these 4 notes, I'm really marking like what things I want to copy, because if I then change it and I don't paste it, then it will. In fact, let's just see if this works. Let me see if I'm gonna use another pattern. Let me see if I'm actually right. Okay, so if I got this and then I mark it, which is, by the way, you use on the PC, it's Alt. You use Alt B for begin, Alt E for end. Again, Impulse Tracker. That's not common standard these days, but that was true for back in the day. And then to copy it, you would do Alt C. And if you're using the actual Commander X16, you use the Command key, which is basically the same thing. Now, if I change this and then I paste it, you're going to see I paste what I just changed. I did not paste what I copied. And that's because there's no copy buffer right now. It's just looking at the pattern and positions that you copied from, that you marked, and then taking that pattern, looking at what that is, and then pasting it wherever you want to go. So I'm going to have
basically a pointer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a copy buffer. It's just a pointer. That's exactly what it is. It's a set of pointers. And we can even get in the code on showing how this works. And I don't know. I might not put a buffer in. I'm not sure, because one of the things I want to do, like say you mark something, and the reason I said I apologize is because you can't see what you marked. I don't have like the UI elements in place, in part because like I mentioned, every time I scroll, I have to redraw the screen. So I have to keep track of like this large state of like your beginning and end points. I'm already doing that. So being able to like change the color is something I can do. I haven't gotten around to it. Anyway, so since I don't have a copy buffer, I guess even if I do, it doesn't matter. But one thing I want to do is have shortcuts for things like changing the instrument. So in the case of the echo, in fact, the reason I pre-made this song instead of just like composing as I went, which I could do, but I thought would be kind of boring, somehow more boring than listening to me talk, was because like if I want to do, say I want to do an echo, right? So we can even like, I can illustrate this point directly. If I go back here, let me just pick, I'm messing up my patterns all over the place. But keynote observers will see like why the order list is kind of cool. It's only going to play from this order number 0 to the first or the last order that doesn't have a dash. So it's only going to play from order 0 to order 9. It's not going to go play these. So you can actually use it for scratch space, and you can use it to arrange, and you can even use it to like jump around in parts of the song that are not normally in the order list, which is how some crazy impulse tracker songs worked. And I think that includes some of the songs that were made for the original Unreal first-person shooter. I think they did tricks like that. I digress. So getting back to what I was talking about. Cutting and pasting. So, doing delay. So normally to do that in a tracker, you would do something like this. Well, without attenuator, so like if I had the attenuator here, I would just simply do like I did earlier, which is just set whatever value I want, like 5. I don't have that. And so the other way to do that would have been like, oh, let me set the volume. But I'm using an envelope, so I can't set the volume. So I have to actually, oh, I didn't know I could do that. That's interesting. Slash doesn't do anything. But it's cool that I can put that in there. Huh, okay. So the way I would fix it is by changing the instrument. Well, I don't yet have a mode, and I'm going to add it as well, where you can turn on a mode like in the character drawing program that I use to make some of these template screens, like this screen. I use PetDraw, and I inherited it from the 8-bit guy. It's his software, but it wasn't working at one point because the kernel got updated for the X16 throughout the course of it being in alpha. So I fixed it, and I kind of improved it, so I kind of took it over. And anyway, in there, I have a key that will let you determine if you want the cursor to go to the right or if you want the cursor to go down. Either way, whether it goes down or the right and I have to arrow over, this is kind of a pain in the ass for me to like set this instrument like, 15 or whatever different times. So it would be nice if I could like grab the block beginning and then I press like Command I and it would just set every
That would be nice.
You see what I'm getting at? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or I can use like command and brackets, because normally the brackets are what you use to change the octave or the braces. In fact, I don't have that on this screen, and I probably should have it. I do have it on the help screen or the actual manual. Anyway, it'd be nice if I could like change the octave, or press Alt and then bracket, and then I can change all the octave of the block, whatever I've selected, including an entire pattern if I wanted. That's coming. I don't have it yet. So, which explains why A, this song builds on top of itself, and B, why I composed it ahead of time, because like trying to do all that in real time I thought would have been annoying. But anyway, that's why delay is the way it is. And did I do it here? Oh yeah, so this is exploiting. Well, that's just showing off the light actually, so there's really not much more to talk about there, other than it's using a triangle. And I think it's panned. No, it's not panned. There's a couple other things though. Let me get to, where did it go? Oh, it's the drums. That's what I was going to show off. So right now, drum, it's just a noise channel. So I ran out of time, but like you can, for the noise, you can do, other than just noise, you can, a common thing you might want to do is pitch noise up and down to make it sound cool. The Vera doesn't support LSFR, which is what you have on the Game Boy and FamiTracker, which makes the kind of buzzy noise. That doesn't exist, so that's going to have to be emulated using perhaps PCM channel. I'm thinking about maybe ways I could perhaps like try to do something like that, or you just sample LSFR on something else and then just play the sample, whatever. So it doesn't exist today, so it's a little bit limiting, but you can still make some like kind of cool stuff. Like These are just kind of hi-hats. So I say they're cool, but, you know. In fact, you know, why not? I want to see what a volume sweep's going to sound like. So let me just put one in here. Okay. I have to remember which way it slides down, so I can't remember any of my own commands, which is awful. But there's a reason for that, and I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, so we want to do pitch sweep down. So 0-3. Okay. There we go. So let's see. I don't know. Let's see what happens if I do. I don't know. I didn't really do a whole lot. Let me crank this thing up. Oh, that's pitch sweep up also. I didn't. Oh yeah, I can hear it. It's doing some interesting things there. Not as crazy as I kind of expected, maybe. Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to play with that. Actually, let's play with that right now. I'm kind of curious. So I'm just going to set up noise at full volume, noise, and no envelope, so it'll just play forever, which will be sweet sounding. And then I'm going to set a sweep. So there we go. Now, this does point out an issue, and that is that that's the wrong one. That is that sweeps for something like this are actually kind of slow. You can also hear it repeating because I have the sweep set to loop. So I have not quite figured out how I'm going to solve that yet. For pitches, I think for the most part it's fine. And yeah, I don't know. Let me see. Did I add an effect for that? No, I did not. So I don't really know what to do about that other than for the envelopes. This is the reason why I wanted the envelopes to be like 16-bit, because they're also going to be plus and minus, so you can go up or down. And to influence the pitch, which is in the Vera is 2 bytes, and I think in the FM it's also 2 bytes, which makes sense because pitch is logarithmic and 8 bits is not nearly enough to specify like all the pitches that you would want. So I may have to figure out how to do a fast and slow sweep, and that might be a modifier in the volume column that you can turn on that changes like the sweep mode, which would allow you to do something that's a little bit more interesting that you might want to use for the noise channel. Anyway, so that was noise, which I think, yeah, it's here. So we've got one more through my little demo, and that is one of my favorites, actually. 2 of my favorites, which is the Mega Man style detune from FamiTracker, I guess. But in the Vera, we have 16 channels, so we can do all sorts of kind of crazy chorus if we want to. The difference is, just like with FamiTracker, you need to use multiple channels to do that. In earlier versions of the tracker, I was using a different sound engine, and I haven't talked about it at all right now, but it's fair to talk about, and I need to add it to the documentation. I moved away from it because it didn't quite meet the needs for what I wanted in the tracker, which is kind of low level. Like, you want to be able to address all the channels on purpose and like make things really, you want to be in control, but the trade-off is you need more channels to do certain things. Like, you want to play a chord, you need at least 3 channels. You want to do chorus, you need at least 2. You want to do a supersaw, you need 1 to 16, and you have to, like, you know, put in the same note 16 times or use copy and paste or whatever. The sound engine I used before was Concerto, and it's amazing. I think it's fantastic, and I'm actually kind of excited to use it if I can couple it with a MIDI interface for the X16 where I can turn it into a kind of like a synthesizer, where you might be sending MIDI commands. You might have like a patch that's like one instrument where you can do all sorts of really complicated stuff with like a single note. Something that would be, you can do in a tracker. It's not, I mean, you definitely can do all that stuff, but you're going to be doing it a lot more low level and like manual. So that comes back to the chorus. So here, like, I'm repeating, actually this is a good example of a stateless effect. The chorus is set actually in the instruments. And I think I'm using, what is 0B? I don't remember. Oh, 0B is an interesting command. It's what I call pulse olo, which is basically vibrato, but for the pulse width. So it's just moving the pulse width back and forth, which makes the chorusy thing to me, more interesting. And then I'm using a stateless effect, which is volume slide, because for the pattern volume slide, it will go down to 0 and not loop. So where the volume sweep will loop, like a sweep would. And I didn't want to do that here. So I have a normal volume slide, and I do have to specify it every single time in the pattern. This is really important because if you do a really fast volume slide, the stateless effects are at the speed of the pattern. So every time the pattern, like if you specify a really fast volume slide, that's great, but it's only for that one row. And if you're, depending on the speed that you're playing the song, you might hear like stair step effects, which you might want, but you might not. And if you don't want those, you have to use a sweep. And I'm probably not going to fix that because I felt like there might be a need to where if someone might want to do that and you have the option of just using like a sweep. So that's why this is here. And it demonstrates how you would do an effect that does not persist in like the channel. And there'll probably be more of them, but for now, there's actually not that many. And it's in the documentation about which ones are stateful and which ones aren't. And then finally, rounding it out is arpeggiator, which is super cool. I mean, it's not anything unique. It sounds the same as all the other ones, but I like it. So I'm doing a lot of stuff there in addition to arpeggiator. And by the way, I don't have to, it's not a note effect. Like it's persistent. So I can just like, I don't need that. So if I don't need to change the arpeggiation chord effectively, I don't need to specify it again. If I do, then I would. So, right. That's how you would do that. Same as FemiTracker. And then I'm specifying a volume. So I've got this like cool little echo going on before I do whatever that command does, which I don't remember. What is? Oh, it's set PWM. So yeah, that's how I'm setting the pulse width to a value. And I'm doing it here again, and then I'm doing panning to the left, panning to the right, and then I'm setting pulse width in the effect column. So this is again one way you can double up effects, and that's how I got all that stuff going on without having to use a table. So it was kind of a whirlwind tour. I think the one thing I didn't cover is how orders work. It might be apparent just by how I've been using them, but basically, if you want to make a quote new pattern, you can just type in a pattern number and you have a new pattern. So then I can use that anywhere I want. And the way it works is by typing it in, you're not like willing it into the world. It already exists and it's just empty. It's just nice to know that like when you make one, you can go see what it is. Folks that are familiar with the X16 will probably wonder where these are stored. This is stored in bank memory, and I'm using a interesting trick. Patterns do not start at 0. But if you notice, everything else does. So the pattern starts at 0. Like the order list starts at 0. Like instruments start at 0. Patterns start at 1. The reason patterns start at 1 is because I'm using bank's memory, and bank 0 is for the kernel. So I can't use pattern 0 unless I just subtract by 1, and I can do that. I just was lazy. I didn't think there was really a reason to do that just to make it look pretty. And I probably will do that just to make it consistent, but it just adds more stuff to the code, and I didn't want to worry about it. So each bank, or you have enough patterns for how much memory you have. So in the emulator, there's 2 megabytes, and then on all the current X16 sold, it's also 2 megabytes. So you can go all the way up to 0, almost to FF. You can't go to FF because I actually use the last couple of pages for things like the instruments and the envelopes. Well, actually, and this as well. Like the song metadata is stored in a page. Tables are going to be stored there. What else is stored there? I think that's it. So I take a couple of pages from the end, so you can't go all the way to FF, but I did the math, and you can still make like a 40-minute song. You can still make a really long song, depending on how fast you go. And then anyway, once you have an order, you can arrange them however you want. So I'm just going to just tromps all over my song and just, do whatever. So you can just define them here. And if you ever want to go to one, like it just says, you just press G and it pulls up the pattern. You arrange your song basically by creating patterns and then arranging the patterns. And then boom, at some point you have a song. If you want to erase a pattern, like say you want to shorten the song, you just press, and this is going to sound awful, you just put in 0. Which, by the way, you shouldn't do. You can actually go to kernel memory, and I can just crash the computer by making changes here. So don't do that. and I need to fix that. But that's the beauty of an 8-bit computer, right?
That is, yeah, that is definitely a bunch of hackers are now going to come and
Yeah. Ruin their own song. I mean, I could play it.
ruin your songs.
I don't think I can change it. Yeah, that's the kernel, or whatever it's storing in bank 0 for kernel memory. Yeah, so I need to, I'll fix it, because really what you should be able to do is just add dashes, and I don't have dash working. So if you do press dash, it doesn't do anything. And I probably should make it to where you actually can't put in or pattern 0, because for obvious reasons that I just explained. Anyway, that was a lot, I understand. And I wanted to have an extended video because I haven't had one yet on how to explain all this stuff. I'm not sure. We'll probably cut this up into maybe some chunks here or there, but I hope I didn't miss anything. If I did, and even if I didn't, I continually update things. So, I mean, this documentation might get updated daily as I'm working on stuff. So the developer documentation is trash. I apologize. It's terrible. I mean, actually, this one's actually pretty accurate, but I need to update the developer docs. But right now, I've been the only person working on it, so I kind of feel that it's more important for people to be able to use the thing. And so they're there. But if you want to getting dirty with the source code, just check out the repository, and that's linked from here, somewhere right here. You can go there and then grab the source. There is a make file, so you have to install CA65 and make sure it's the X16 version. I think that might be all you need. And then you can just make it, and then I've got a run script to help you run it using the X16 emulator. And I didn't go through, and I won't, just from a timing standpoint. The actual source code, we'll do that some other time. But it is kind of sprawling. I don't know if that's good or bad, but everything is pretty well spread out. A weird aside, but like David Murray, the 8-bit guy, well, I don't know if he writes his code in a single file or if he just compiles it down and that's how he shares it. But his assembly files are one file, and mine is like 100, and I just don't, credit where credit due, I don't know how he does that. Like, it's amazing. I have very, very specific things, like, I guess a typical modern software developer that's used to writing from high-level languages. That's just how I think. So, the play row routine, for example, this is what, 7 different assembly files that are all linked together. But, you can like pull one up and go, oh, this is what this thing does. So it's not the worst, but it is using some advanced-ish CA65 features. I'll get into that some other day. The point was, documentation's here. It will be changing. And I think the only thing to be aware of is it is an alpha. So I'm going to try very hard not to completely break save files. And if I do, I'm going to try to write like Python things, like update people's, because I'm not going to do that in the X16. I don't think I have enough memory, or I'd rather not consume the resources on the X16 to worry about like file differences. I will have an external tool for that people can use when I do introduce incompatibilities once I get to beta. So for the alpha, I'm going to try to do my best, but there's a chance that like some of the pattern effect name or numbers are going to change, or I'm going to have to add more banks. Like when I get to the FM chip, the save file is going to need to have more information than it has in it today, and I need to like fix that. So if I can fix it for folks, I will. If not, it means you might have to do some adjusting in your save files between different versions. I didn't get to it actually, but one last thing, speaking of numbers, because this is kind of important. The reason I've been floundering with not being able to remember these damn numbers is because I had the same problem with FamiTracker, because like I think FamiTracker 0 was arpeggiator. I think I remember that, and then like I think 1 was pitch. Doesn't matter. The point is the numbers don't really mean a whole lot, and I'm planning on, in fact, on the forums I have a very old version, and this is how people can follow me as well. I have a very old version of what I'm about to propose. It's just not a high priority. Where's the download? Oh, here we go. So folks can download it from here as well, although I don't update it here as often. If we go, I think it was on this page. Yeah, so this is one. Is this the only example I have? Yeah, I think I got lazy. Oh, that's an old version. Actually, here you go, John. This is what I originally had. So I did have the numbers. I just took them away. I'm a monster. So I'll put something back. Um, what I was gonna do,
going backwards with the user interface, Tim.
I know, I know,
Steps
man.
back. Oh.
Making the user interface work is the
It is kind of
most.
busy, but it seems like, especially with the link thing, it seems like that would be helpful.
Yes, yes. It's just like there's not a lot of really good tooling. There's like VTUI is a really good library for drawing text elements, and I'm not using it. And the only reason is because I already had to write a rendering library, and I haven't switched it out yet. And I might at some point. But man, user interfaces are they're a lot of work. So um, getting it working right is especially since I make static interfaces. So I prototype what the interface looks like in the drawing program, and then I get it about right, and I'm like, cool, and then I implement the things around it, and then if I need to make a change, I kind of have to go back and forth, and I do that because it makes prototyping a little bit easier, but it also makes like I have like weird coordinates for like where things are, like stuff I take for granted. Like if we go back to the tracker, like being able to tab over, oh man, that took some effort. Like that took, at least for me, that took some work to figure that shit out. Or like if of scrolling. So I mentioned the instruments don't scroll, the orders list does scroll. So like getting that going, it took some effort. And so yeah, that's part of the reason it doesn't exist. Oops, and I actually have it looping. So that's actually shouldn't. Oh no, that's kind. That's actually good. Never mind. Anyway, point is, I'm going to try to use. I'm thinking anyway about using named, well, character-based effects. So like in this example, I have V for whatever reason, and it's colored. I don't know if I'm gonna do it that way, but like I'm trying to make it easier so that it doesn't have to be like FamiTracker and Furnace and Defil Mask where you have to use these numbers and the number. Yeah, because it means I constantly have to have a pattern effects thing open because I can't remember what the numbers do. Instead of having like at least a little bit of a hint, so like P, pitch, pitch sweep down in this case. R, well, R is next to P, so maybe that means something. Yeah, it means pitch sweep up. Or like D, volume slide down, D for down. Stuff like that. So, or arpeggiator, A, glissando, G. It's not going to be perfect. It wasn't perfect in Impulse Tracker. It's not going to be perfect here. And there might be too many effects, or it just might not be worth it. But one benefit of doing it that way is I gain one extra channel. I have 7 channels in the display instead of 6, which could be really helpful when there's 25 damn channels running around the thing and you're going to have to navigate all that, which I do have plans for on making that easier, but this is one of those ways that would make that easier. So I think that is it. So I'm glad everybody hung out for this. If you're watching live or you're watching wherever the hell we're going to put this up in whatever way we're going to edit it. But that was DreamTracker. So for us in the band, we're likely going to use it in addition to, since my camera's already active, in addition to this cool show and tell. Oh, you haven't seen this yet, John?
Yeah, I haven't.
Oh.
I mean, I guess if we're going to practice Monday, I'll come
yeah, you'll see it, but you can see it here. Like it's pretty great. In fact, let me just pull it up. In addition to using DreamTracker, in the past we used, in fact, for our first album, we used FamiTracker, and we used LSDJ, which I'm still going to use on real Game Boys. My other ones, my show and my recording Game Boys are in a special box, but this is going to be much easier for me to use like portably. From number one, the screen is ginormous for Game Boy. And number two, it actually has good battery life, which my Game Boy SP doesn't. So there you go. Anyway, where was I talking about that? Oh, so we're going to use, just like we did on our first album, we're going to use this for making chip surf in addition to all the other stuff we use. So LSDJ as well. Probably not a lot of Nintendo, maybe, because the Nintendo can actually do a few things that the Vera can't. But for that, we tend to use the Game Boy. And the Nintendo, I'm a purist, so if we're going to use the Nintendo, I'm going to record it, the real thing, and it's kind of a pain.
Is recording directly off of the X16 is easier. Right,
well,
or is
kind of. Is this connected? No, it's not connected, so I can take it here. So this is the X16, and oh, actually, I can tease people because I got mine signed. Oh yeah, there's a story to that, and I'll share it at a later date. Anyway, so on the X16, yeah, there's this audio option header. Probably can't see it very well, but it's there, and I think I'm gonna have to use that. I think because the audio output that's normally here on the developer board, I think they're going to fix this later. It's really quiet, and so either I'm going to have an expansion card that fixes that, just that takes the audio off the motherboard, or something, because it being really quiet also makes it really noisy, and I need to figure out a way to avoid that. So, yes, we will be using the real one for sure to record stuff, but I'll have to rig something up. It won't be as bad as the Nintendo, but I'll have to think of something, I think.
Well, that's the way we've always operated. Nothing is easy.
But worth it. Easy, but worth it. So
yes, we suffer for our art.
Yes, speaking of that, I should probably leave us with that tidbit of saying, and it's in the documentation as well, but the DreamTracker took a lot of work, and it was work away from writing music for the band, any of it, the old stuff or the new stuff. And
however, you have somehow written more chiptunes like in the span of you writing this DreamTracker than you have in like the last like 5 years.
Yeah, I guess that's true. They're not complete songs, though, right? Like, I mean, this one is cool.
Well, they never start out as complete. Well, that's not true. Sometimes they do start out as complete songs, but a lot of times they don't start out as complete songs. So that's okay.
That's true. I mean, I'm curious to see what, like, I pooped out the live stream one, and I'm like, this is kind of cool, but I cannot hear a Chip Surf song in that yet because it's kind of dark. So we'll see. Anyway, the point was, if folks do want to support it, I'm showing the code right now. Yeah, this is the code. You've seen it. Here we go. Oh, that's the SD card image. All right, we're flying off the rails. If you want to support us in the band, obviously using DreamTracker would be great. Where did it go? There we go. Obviously using DreamTracker would be great, just to promote it, just so people start using it. So I know people, and people can submit bugs and feature requests and stuff like that would be useful. If folks really want to support us, like right now, DreamTracker's free. It's open source. Probably will always be that way. I haven't decided, like for like stuff like MIDI sync or things that like pro level folks might use. Like if I might ask, maybe for a donation for the MIDI integration. I don't know if I will or not. I think I'd rather keep this in the hands of most people, and most trackers are free to use. Maybe to pay homage to Impulse Tracker, which costs like $5 for the Wave exporter. But really, I don't want to do that. Instead, I think if people want to support us, like just supporting our work and our albums and stuff would be great. If you want to buy an album, that would be fantastic. If you just want to tell people about it, if you just want to listen to it off Bandcamp, sure. Whatever you want to do would be great. Or just tell people about us. That would be fantastic. And that would also help the tracker out as well, because then more people end up using it, and cool, everybody wins. I think with that, I can press stop on the stream, and we can call it a day.
Okay. Bye.